Hey guys, so in my old video, I was a lot more loud and explosive, and honestly, I don't think I liked it as much. So now I'm going to try being more laid back and seeing how the video turns out. Now let's begin. So the United States invaded Venezuela. Now talking about this isn't something I thought I'd be doing, but then I asked myself, why not? It's a complicated, intricate topic and one worth discussing. To give a brief rundown, the United States launched a large-scale military operation in Venezuela's capital, seizing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. What's striking is how deeply this action has divided people. On one side, many are strongly against it. They're asking important questions. Why is the United States getting involved in a foreign nation's affair? And what authority does the US really have to conduct military operations in another country? On the other side, some people respond by saying, why does it matter? Venezuelans are happy. And then you have figures like Donald Trump claiming that Venezuela has a major drug problem and that those drugs are being imported to the United States. Now, let's get one thing out of the way. I don't believe Venezuela is a primary source of these drugs. You could argue that some drugs may pass through, but the majority don't actually come from Venezuela. From what I understand, a large portion, especially drugs like cocaine, which Trump specifically mentioned, comes from Colombia. And just to be absolutely clear, that does not mean that the United States should invade Colombia. Now that we've cleared that up, let's start with the group that's against this change. Now, I actually agree with them on one point. A foreign country should not be invading another country. That said, I also don't believe Nicolas Maduro is a good president. In my view, he's an authoritarian who disguises himself as a democratic leader while actively undermining the very democracy he claims to uphold. He effectively dismantled Venezuela's National Assembly and replaced it with loyalists, people who ensured he could remain in power. I would even go as far to say that the reason food, medicine, and other basic necessities have become unaffordable is largely because of him. There was a time when many of these essentials were accessible. When oil demand was high, Venezuela was making significant profits. Much of that success came under the previous president, Hugo Chavez. While in power, Chavez took oil profits and reinvested them back into the people, making basic goods attainable. But after Chavez died in 2013, Maduro took over. As oil demand declined, the funding that once supported these necessities slowly disappeared, and prices skyrocketed to unimaginable levels. Maduro bears responsibility for this because he failed to create a backup plan, something that would have kept these essentials accessible for his citizens. And even now, the situation is worse. Government officials are able to buy food and medicine at low prices, only to resell them to the public at extreme markups. That profit flows right back to the president and high-ranking officials. In other words, Maduro and those around him are making money off the starvation and humiliation of the Venezuelan people. So, when I hear people, especially non-Venezuelan protesters in the United States, say that Maduro was a good man or that he should be freed, I can't sympathize with that position. You don't live there. When you have food on your table and the privilege of knowing it will be there tomorrow, you cannot truly understand what it means to starve to the point of suffering. Privilege will always blind people to despair. Now, I want to quickly bring up this distinction. There are some people that are protesting against the idea of a regime change in Venezuela. That type of protest is fine. That type of protest is justified. I can understand that. I'm mainly against the people that are protesting for Nicolas Maduro, especially if you're like a non-Venezuelan citizen. Protesting for Nicolas Maduro is where I kind of just find it iffy and odd. Now I want to talk about the group that believes this is a good thing. Yes, Maduro isn't a good person, but I don't think this actually changes anything. All the corrupt systems he helped build into Venezuela's dictatorship are still in place. The same people will continue to profit off the suffering of the Venezuelan people. What frustrates me is that many who support this invasion don't refine their position based on facts, because they refuse to educate themselves. Removing a president is only a temporary solution. Can't keep throwing water out of a boat when there's a hole in the hull. On top of that, Trump has also decided to seize large amounts of oil, which I don't see going over well with countries that do business with Venezuela, countries like China. And the biggest elephant in the room is this: US interventions have never truly been about helping the people. Let's look at Iraq, because the parallels are hard to ignore. After 9/11, the evidence clearly pointed to Al-Qaeda, a relatively small terrorist group operating out of Afghanistan, a country far from Iraq with an entirely different language and political situation. Yet, when George Bush decided to respond to 9/11, he sold the American people on the idea that Iraq was harboring terrorists and weapons of mass destruction. Paul Wolfowitz, who was Secretary of Defense at the time, strongly pushed Bush to redirect resources away from Al-Qaeda and towards Iraq. He used regions like Kurdistan and southern Iraq, areas where people already opposed Saddam Hussein, as justification to attack while simultaneously extracting oil from those regions. The similarities are striking. In both cases, the US framed its actions as morally justified while concealing its real interests, such as oil extraction. Even now, with no president in Venezuela, the US has moved to take control of the country. That's not unprecedented. The same thing happened in Iraq. After capturing Saddam Hussein, the US took control of Iraq and its military. Then came one of the worst decisions imaginable. The US disbanded the Iraqi military, firing generals and soldiers alike, and attempting to start from scratch. This stripped Iraq of its security infrastructure and left a bunch of trained soldiers unemployed. Those men eventually formed militant groups that went by many names but ultimately became known as ISIS. Now, who knows what the US plans for Venezuela, but the parallels are far too familiar to ignore. And Iraq wasn't the only case. The US has done this in Libya, Haiti, Afghanistan, and beyond. Each of those countries has its own complex history, but I focus on Iraq because the comparison is the clearest and the most alarming. So for me, I think two things can be true at the same time. First, Nicolas Maduro is not a good person and does not deserve sympathy or protest in the United States advocating for him. Second, US invasions have never helped anyone. They are tools that allow the rich to get richer while the oppressed suffer even more. Some people might call this a centrist take, but I disagree. I believe this is a nuanced take. Understanding both Maduro and the United States led me here. And this perspective actually answers both sides of the argument, because if you fully commit to only one side, you're never able to understand the opposing questions. Questions like, why are you upset that Maduro is gone if Venezuelans are happy? Or, why are you in favor of a US invasion if it's never worked before? If we can't answer those questions honestly and without identity politics, then we're not really engaging with the issue. We need to be able to confront these contradictions, especially when the consequences are this severe. If I were the one making the decision, I would not allow the United States to invade Venezuela, but instead find ways through international laws to take down Maduro. Yes, Maduro is terrible, but the invasion has already cost lives, and that is never acceptable. And based on the US's track record of foreign interventions, it's clear that in the long run, this will not benefit the Venezuelan people. More broadly, we need to bring more nuance and education into discussions like this if we want to truly understand the world around us. If we just repeat opinions handed to us by politicians, we'll never get anywhere. We all know they lie, so why do we keep listening to them? Or to their mouthpieces on social media? Why not learn from history? Why not look at what's actually happening? Below, I'll be linking 2 videos that help educate me on this topic. I highly recommend watching them if you're interested in understanding this issue more deeply. Now, with your permission, I'll be signing off. Goodbye.